We are looking at Peter van Inwagen on a chapter titled The Place of Rational Beings in the World. And this is from his book titled Metaphysics. And in part one, we're just setting up the issues and proposing a couple of responses that Peter van Inwagen think are plausible. So the question is, why is there a universe like ours? Why does a universe exist at all? And why does it have the kind of parameters that supports the existence of rational beings? In a moment, we'll talk about the improbability of this kind of universe existing. Now, the best way to explain the existence of rational beings like ourselves in a universe is something that has two initially plausible options, according to PVI or Van Inwagen. One option is that it's due to chance. It's a random thing that occurred, and we are here ultimately due to chance. The other option is that it's due to the purposeful action of a non-human, of course, being, something that exists that could do such a thing. Now, Van Inwagen does say there is another less plausible option, and that's the one that Parfit actually suggests. Derek Parfit's axiarchic principle, some impersonal force that motivates universes to exist that have value. And Van Inwagen doesn't really think that makes much sense. Now, there is an option on the consideration of whether or not it's from chance that Van Inwagen rules out. So this is a suggestion that has been made. It's not so unusual that rationality developed, because if you have an infinite amount of time, all possibilities within that time would be fulfilled ultimately. And so this is just one of those possibilities. So we end up with a universe like ours. Now, of course, the problem is our contemporary science is quite confident that the universe has existed for a finite amount of time, less than 14 billion years. Right? So the idea of how likely is it in that amount of time that matter just happened to come together in the way that produces something that's alive, and the odds are against it to the extreme, that we would have a universe and have this occur. So here's the challenge that we face, the initial description of the difficulty, given the universe with the laws that we have. So here's what we're talking about. After the incredibly unlikely formation of a living creature by chance, so this is Van Inwagen, he's very skeptical, even if we have the universe that we have, that we would even get a living creature. But even after that, it would have to be capable of reproducing in the right way and capable of evolving into a creature with rationality. Now, those steps, those three steps, formation of life at all, formation of life that can reproduce, and then the development of rationality from life, Van Inwagen thinks is extremely unlikely, even given the universe with the laws that we have. So Van Inwagen is not an anti-science person. He's not a young Earth creationist, but he is very skeptical of the contemporary story of evolution and the existence of rational life. But he says that that's, we can put that aside. The really difficult part comes in when we consider the initial conditions of the universe. And those initial conditions have to be just right in order to produce a world capable of life. So we need to think about what the universe would have to be like. And Van Inwagen mentions these four things, the requirements for living organisms. You have to have one that's capable of sustaining matter and not just energy. And the matter has to be of a kind that can form complex interactions. You have to have that in order to have even the most simple living organism. Also, you need one in which not all the elements are radioactive. So you have to have some stable elements, and you have to have a universe that's stable with matter that exists for longer than a few seconds. And so if you just hypothesize universes, some of them would not exist for longer than a few seconds. And you have to have a universe that has stars that last long enough for evolutionary processes to take place. And the stars are going to be able to provide a consistent energy source as well for living organisms once they would develop to continue to evolve. And there are many, many problems with getting these requirements all together in one universe. So the odds of this kind of a universe that could support rational life are very low. So when we say very low, it's a euphemism, an understatement. So physical parameters like the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, the speed of light, the rate of expansion of the Big Bang, the gravitational constant, the mass of electrons, the charge of electrons, many other things. They all had to be within extremely fine parameters in order for a universe to be able to support life at all. And so we've talked about those parameters elsewhere in the contemporary design argument. But one way of thinking about this is you could think of a machine with 30 dials, and each of the dials is numbered 1 through 1,000,000, and each of those have to be set exactly correct. So like the first dial has to be set on 300,047, and the second dial has to be set on 932,562, right? And so on for 30 dials. And the odds of this occurring is just exceedingly unlikely. It's much more unlikely than, say, you had 15 friends who are playing poker tonight and they each draw a royal flush the first time that they're playing, right? That just a straight 5-card draw game, and all of your 15 friends on the first hand get a royal flush, right? That's just not going to happen. We just know it's not going to happen. It's similar to buying one ticket to the Powerball and winning, and then waiting until it gets over 100 million, and then buying one ticket and winning, and doing that more than 100 times in a row. It just won't happen. So the tentative proposal from Van Inwagen is that God initially created the world the way it is. And he says that's much more plausible than the hypothesis that rational beings arose by chance. Now, this is roughly the contemporary design argument, but the argument only gives the conclusion that a rational being designed the world. Other rational beings might exist. It doesn't give a lot of info about what the purpose of the rational being is. Now, having said that, Van Inwagen says, well, if the God as we describe him in traditional religions, that is Western religions, there would be a simply explained purpose. The purpose of rational beings might be that they are designed to glorify God. There might be other purposes, but that's the right kind of answer, and it seems plausible, says Van Inwagen. For example, why would you do this just to have a play performed or an experiment? Such a rational being that is that brilliant wouldn't need to do such things. And so there must be a greater purpose like the one he suggested. That's his support, again, for going with the hypothesis that God created the universe. Now, there are three objections to this hypothesis that he thinks fails, and then one that he actually considers a serious challenge to the argument. So Van Inwagen is not a full endorser of this kind of reasoning, because he does think that there is a challenge to the argument that is significant. But let's consider some of the objections that fail. So one objection is by Stephen Jay Gould, and this is the idea that the universe had to be some way, and though it's highly unlikely, it had to be this way in order for us to be here and contemplate its improbability. Now, a lot of people have suggested this. Now, Van Inwagen doesn't hold back at all in his description, and I'll just put his quote here. This is his statement as worded by Van Inwagen. He says, "This must be one of the most annoyingly obtuse arguments in the history of philosophy." Yeah, he does not like this objection. He thinks it's fairly weak reasoned. And he says, why? Because look, there's still something that has to be explained. If you're talking about chance versus something that requires an explanation, this is not the kind of thing that you can just shrug and say, well, we're here, so it succeeded. There's still something that needs to be explained. So some put it this way, the setting that we have, if we go back to think of those dials on the machine that had to be set precisely correctly, those settings are that we actually have are valued while the other ones are not, because they don't end up with a universe like ours with creatures with rationality. Think of it this way. This is Richard Swinburne's suggestion. If you're put, some madman has you captured, you're going to kill you, he's going to kill you unless a 10-deck card shuffling machine draws out, spits out 10 cards, and they are all 10 the ace of spades. Okay? If that happens, then you survive. If any other combination happens, you will get killed by the machine. And the probability of getting those 10 aces, if you just calculate it out, is 2.74 times 10 to the minus 21st power, or I've put the zeros all there so you can see that on your screen, right? 0.00, et cetera, 274, and that is an exceptionally low probability. It's like getting dealt 3 royal flushes in spades with 3 deals. And there you see the probability of that occurring. It just doesn't happen. If such a thing did happen, your immediate and rational response is, wait a minute, it's rigged, right? If you survive that machine, and this is your story that you were going to die unless you got the 10 aces of spades, and you survive, yes, you're relieved. Yes, you're glad. Yes, you recognize the improbability, but then you say, wait a minute, this was rigged. It was just an experiment to see how I would react under this extreme stress or something like that. Now, Van Inwagen has a principle that can distinguish those cases that need explanation from those cases that we could just shrug and say are by chance. And so this is his initial suggestion of the principle. So imagine you have a very large set of exhaustive and inconsistent possibilities, more than 1 million. And we could just number these A1 through AN. And then suppose that among that very, very large set, AK is a member of the set that's realized. Okay, so that's the particular occurrence that happens. Now, if we can think of an explanation of why AK was actualized that is good if true, and there are no parallel explanations for any of the other possibilities, in other words, AK is unique in this way, then the fact that AK was realized was not due to chance. It has to be explained, and we have a good explanation for it. Now, in my paper, Mundane or Incredible, I talk about this principle and I refine it a bit more carefully to provide a guideline for ruling out chance. So Van Inwagen set it up, and I've tried to improve on that, although I'm sure he would not think that it was much of an improvement. In any case, let's go on. How do we apply the principle now? Well, some very improbable events are due to chance. This is true, but others require an explanation. So, for example, you're in a class of 20 people, 19 students and the professor, and you consider the last 4 digits of the IDs of all the students and the professor, and you would just list them up on the board, going just down the room, front to back, right to left. And so you just list those 4 digits. Now, that is an extremely improbable number that you've just put up on the board. But it's just due to chance. It does not need a special explanation. There's going to be nothing special about that number. It's kind of like the difference in a 1 in 8 billion lottery. So say everybody in the entire world is assigned a number, and somebody's going to win $10 billion, let's say, and it's guaranteed. So that's one kind of lottery. And so the person who wins the lottery can say, man, I beat the incredible odds. This is amazing. However, there's no special explanation that's needed. It was simply by chance that that individual won. Now, contrast that where there's not a winner guaranteed, where you are just individually identified and then given a 1 in 8 billion chance of winning, say, $10 billion, right? And then if you win, you would think it was rigged. That's not the chance, right? There's no way you would win in that kind of lottery by chance. And you can explain it, right? Somebody rigged it. And all the other options for the numbers would be losing numbers. But this one number has an explanation. Somebody rigged it. So the actual setting on the cosmic dial, to again use that machine analogy, suggests an explanation. What's the explanation? A rational being designed it this way. Whereas the other settings don't have such an explanation. They're just universes that appear very quickly and then disappear, or they only contain black holes, or they, in some other way, do not have those basic requirements for life. This universe is unique, so the explanation would make sense that a being designed it to be this way, whereas the other explanation, there are other ways that the universe could be, don't fit into any special explanation. So according to the principle, the existence of the actual universe was not due to chance. An explanation is required. So we just apply our principle, which is very reasonable, to this kind of a situation, and an explanation is required, and thus Gould's response fails. You can't just shrug and say, well, it had to be this way in order for us to be here. No, its universe being this way still cries out for an explanation. So What are the other options that Van Inwagen considers? We will have to evaluate those in part 2.